On an overcast Tuesday afternoon in the heart of downtown, where luxury boutiques lined pristine sidewalks and business executives rushed between meetings, a young transgender woman named Chen hesitated outside the towering entrance of Sterling Trust Financial. Her fingers trembled as they gripped a weathered bank card, the plastic edges worn smooth from years of being carried but never used. Rain began to mist against the building's reflective windows, and Maya took one final breath before pushing through the revolving doors into a world that had never felt like it was built for people like her. She wore a simple floral dress that had seen too many washings, her hair pulled back in a careful ponytail, and her posture spoke of someone who had learned to make themselves smaller in spaces that felt too big. All she was asking for seemed harmless enough. She simply wanted to know what remained in an account she barely remembered opening. If you believe that dignity matters for every human being, and if you support stories that remind us of our shared humanity, please pause for just a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Life Stories. Your engagement allows us to continue sharing stories that matter in a world hungry for compassion. Maya's path to Sterling Trust that afternoon hadn't been paved with confidence. It had been carved out of necessity. For the past week, she had been living in a shelter after losing her job at a call center, a position she'd held for barely 3 months before corporate restructuring sent her back to square one. The bank card in her possession had been given to her by her grandmother, the only family member who had stood by her through her transition, who had looked her in the eyes and said, "You are exactly who you were meant to be." Her grandmother had passed away 18 months ago, whispering something about taking care of things and checking the account when you need it most. Maya had been too consumed by grief to follow up on those words. But today, with 73 cents in her pocket and nowhere else to turn, she decided it was time to find out if her grandmother's final words held any meaning, or if they were simply the hopeful wishes of a dying woman. The interior of Sterling Trust hummed with the kind of efficiency that only money can buy. Monitors displayed real-time market data in brilliant colors. Employees dressed in designer labels moved with purpose between glass-walled offices. Leather chairs sat arranged in perfect symmetry. The air itself seemed to smell expensive. And occupying the largest desk on the main floor was Jonathan Silverman, a self-made millionaire who had built his fortune in commercial real estate and private equity. His voice carried across the marble lobby as he entertained a group of high-net-worth clients, telling stories that always ended with him as the hero. He was someone who had never questioned his place in the world, never doubted that he belonged exactly where he was. Nothing unexpected ever threw him off balance. Until Maya walked toward the service counter. She approached slowly, her eyes scanning for the least intimidating teller, finally settling on a middle-aged woman named Patricia Hollis. Patricia looked up from her computer screen, and her expression shifted through several emotions in rapid succession. Surprise, uncertainty, and then something softer that might have been empathy. Other customers turned to look. Some pretended not to stare while obviously staring. Others made no effort to hide their curiosity or judgment. Maya's voice came out quieter than she intended as she explained that she needed to check an old account balance. Patricia nodded kindly and asked for identification and the card. After examining both, she frowned slightly and explained that accounts this old required verification through their senior wealth management system. She gestured toward Jonathan's station, explaining that his access level could pull up legacy files. Maya felt her stomach drop. She didn't want to go over there, didn't want to walk through that gauntlet of expensive suits and raised eyebrows. But she had come this far. She couldn't turn back now. Jonathan noticed Maya approaching before she reached his desk. He exchanged glances with his colleagues, one eyebrow raised in amused confusion. This wasn't the type of client who typically required his services. He assumed there had been some kind of mistake, that someone would redirect this situation before it reached him. But when Patricia personally escorted Maya to his station, Jonathan realized he was expected to handle this. He leaned back in his leather chair, his expression hovering somewhere between curiosity and condescension. When Maya extended the faded card across his mahogany desk, he accepted it with 2 fingers, as if concerned it might somehow contaminate his impeccably manicured hands. A millionaire being interrupted to help a transgender woman check what was probably an empty account. The absurdity of the moment wasn't lost on him, and a smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth. But Maya wasn't smirking. Her jaw was clenched tight. Her breathing had gone shallow. She could feel every eye in that building burning into her back, measuring her worth, questioning her right to exist in their space. All she wanted was one simple answer, just a number on a screen. The atmosphere seemed to crystallize as Jonathan swiped the card through his terminal. And then the world shifted on its axis. Jonathan's smirk evaporated like morning fog. His eyes went wide, then narrowed, then widened again. He pulled his reading glasses from his breast pocket and leaned so close to the monitor that his nose nearly touched the screen. His assistant moved closer, squinting at the display, and her mouth fell open in genuine shock. Patricia clasped her hands together, holding her breath. The balance wasn't zero. It wasn't modest. It wasn't anywhere near what someone in Maya's circumstances would be expected to have. It was staggering. Maya's grandmother, Margaret Chen, had been more than the sweet elderly woman who baked cookies and defended her granddaughter against the world. In her younger years, Margaret had been a silent partner in a successful pharmaceutical startup founded by her late husband. When the company had been acquired by a major corporation in the early 2000s, Margaret had received a substantial payout. But she had lived modestly, never flaunting her wealth, investing wisely and quietly. Before her death, Margaret had consolidated everything into a trust account in Maya's name, complete with provisions that the funds would continue growing through carefully managed investments. She had left instructions that Maya should only discover this when she truly needed it, when the world had pushed her far enough that she would finally check. Margaret had hoped that moment would never come. But if it did, she wanted her granddaughter to know that she was protected, valued, and loved beyond measure. Jonathan stayed at the screen, his mind recalculating everything he thought he knew about the person standing before him. This young woman, whom he had dismissed with a glance, whom society had taught him to overlook, was now revealed to be wealthier than half the clients he had spent the morning flattering. Wealthier, in fact, than several people in this very building. For the first time in his career, Jonathan Silverman felt genuinely humbled, stripped of the casual arrogance that had been his armor for decades. The woman he had judged without a second thought now commanded a fortune that demanded his respect whether he wanted to give it or not. The entire room had gone silent, sensing that something extraordinary was unfolding. Slowly, Jonathan stood from his chair, and when he looked at Maya again, it was without the smirk, without the condescension. It was with something closer to awe, and perhaps shame. Maya, however, couldn't make sense of the numbers glowing on the screen. They seemed impossibly large, like something that belonged to someone else entirely. Patricia knelt beside her and began explaining gently what these figures meant, what her grandmother had done, what this moment would change. As understanding dawned, Maya's eyes filled with tears that spilled down her cheeks in silent streams. She wasn't invisible anymore. She wasn't powerless. Her grandmother, even in death, had wrapped her in a protection that no prejudice could penetrate. Safety, freedom, and the chance to live life on her own terms. Whispers rippled through Sterling Trust as news of what had just happened spread from desk to desk. Jonathan, known throughout the financial district for his sharp tongue and sharper business practices, was now speaking to Maya with genuine courtesy. He offered her water, suggested they move to a private conference room, and promised to personally oversee the transition of her assets into active management until she could select her own financial team. Maya nodded slowly, still processing, still clutching the card that had just rewritten her entire future. The rain had stopped outside. Sunlight broke through the clouds, casting geometric patterns across the marble floor. And for Maya, standing in that bank that had felt so hostile just minutes before, the world seemed to tilt towards something better, something kinder, something finally, blessedly fair. If this story resonated with you, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Life Stories. Your support ensures these meaningful stories reach others who might need to hear them. Before we close, we'd love to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever witnessed a moment where someone's assumptions were completely shattered? Tell us your story below. As Maya walked out of Sterling Trust Financial that evening, Stepping into the fresh air with the weight of the world lifted from her shoulders, she understood something essential. Life could be brutal. Society could be unforgiving. But sometimes, woven into the fabric of our darkest moments, there are threads of grace left by those who saw our worth when others refused to look. Threads strong enough to change the entire pattern of our lives. And that day, Maya held Hayes close, knowing her story was no longer written by rejection, but by the enduring power of unconditional love.